What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave podcast here at the Culture Wave Media Network. And this is a first for all of us. Well, Vinny just actually did one of these recordings with Mark a little while ago for Jujutsu Kaisen, but we are doing a Zoom recording. If you guys didn't already know this and you guys have been following our page, we are in a section of the country right now where there was a massive blizzard and there is snow everywhere. And our studio is actually, as I've said previously, but it's located in my backyard. So it's hard to get to the studio right now. There's snow and ice everywhere. So just for the time being, for a couple of records, we're going to be doing the Zoom recording. And I'm one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalmoni. I am joined by Sean Villa and Vinny Albano as they've been here. Yeah, Sean, there
Hello.
you go. Hopefully that shows up on the recording. Um, but but we're here to discuss Night of the Seven Kingdoms overall, the finale, the whole season one. It's unfortunate we have to do this for this bigger discussion for this because we really enjoyed covering it week to week, but we figured it's been long enough. It's been almost, as of the recording, it's been almost a week since the episode dropped. I saw it like now at this point 10 days ago, this episode. So I was kind of
Ooh-wee.
refreshing myself and kind of jumping back into it. And I watched it twice. But really curious to hear your guys' thoughts. So, Vinny right now on my screen is the biggest thing. So let's start with Vinny. Vinny, kind of just overall thoughts on the finale first, and then if you want to give
Hmm.
a couple of quick thoughts on what you thought overall, how they did with the whole first season of Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, so I love this show. The finale, I was a big fan of. I like that the tone there was a lot more comedy. I remember on a podcast or two ago, we talked about how the dramatic sequence of episodes that was the build up and the trial of the seven were excellent, incredibly dramatic, incredibly emotional, and epic. But there was a lot of charm that we wanted to be inserted back into this finale. And we get that. We get that through Raymond Fossaway, who has a great, funny sequence. Uh, and a couple other charming moments. Obviously, the ending is filled with charm, it's filled with emotion, but we also have these dramatic moments, with Dunk Egg and the conflict happening there, especially with Makar, who doesn't want Egg to live the life of a hedge knight, but he's more than willing to have Dunk, come to Summerhall. And I just love this finale. I love the symbolism, especially in that last shot with the horses and Sir Pennytree going off into the field. I love all the little bits and bobs with the characters, the filmmaking, and the season as a whole. I've raved about this. I think this 6 episodes of television is leagues better than House of the Dragon. And honestly, I think it handles tone and pacing and performances, writing, sometimes better than a lot of Thrones, which might be a controversial opinion, but I think there are moments and seasons in Thrones, like season 4 of Thrones, is unbeatable. But this is up there. This is upper echelon. So I love this season of television.
Sean, what did you think about the finale and how they handled it, and the season overall?
Yeah, I'm in a very similar boat to Vinny. I think this is some great TV. I think this is an excellent season of television. And the best thing I could say about the finale is that I feel like it is a really, really satisfying conclusion. A lot of the times with season ones, we're left in a position where even if the season was great, where it ends off is because it is fundamentally just the start of a larger story. It feels kind of like, oh man, like I want it back. And this feels like I want it back in a really unique way where I actually feel like if this was just its own thing and like George Martin never wrote more books, this isn't a wider show, I'd be like, awesome. That was an incredible like little mini series. But there's more, and when that's really exciting. But I just think like the payoff in the finale, emotionally, comedically, and as set up for season two is kind of like as good as it can get. I don't really see any way that they could have elevated this higher than it was. Um, we had the penultimate episode, which I think is like incredible. And then this finale is just a really good like emotional cap. I talk a lot about the difference between plot and story, and I feel like the plot kind of peaks in episode 5, and then this is a really good story episode where we just kind of come to a great conclusion with specifically the relationship between Dunk and Sir Arland of Pennytree. I think that the decision to make like their relationship and Dunk as a knight kind of be like the through line of the season, and it concluding with the really like amazing shot of him riding off into the field at the end. I just think it was just a brilliant decision. I think it really ties everything together in a super nice bow. Um, yeah, and I agree with what Vinny said. I think the comedy hits, the emotions there, the music is really great and funny. Ending the season with Company Store is so funny. I don't know. I don't totally know how I feel about them using like real world music in Thrones. It's a little strange, but again, it kind of just speaks to the fact that they're trying stuff and it's all working. Which is better than House of the Dragon. So, it's really exciting. I think this was a great finale.
Yeah, piggybacking off what both of you guys said, I think that you guys kind of put it perfectly. I think that there's great things that both of you guys said that I want to hit on. First, with Vinny talking about the tone and returning back to that, we open with these like we hear a trumpet for the first like one of the first times, if not the first time in Game of Thrones in a very unique way, and it's played for comedy, kind of showing that uh, it's almost like a hangover. Like it's like the fight hangover that all of them are kind of encompassing and surrounding themselves in and engrossing themselves within. And I just think that Lionel obviously has served such a great comedic foil, and you actually do see a bit of a change even in Daniel Ing's performance when he talks about him being him and the and Raymond and some of the other people that actually winded up defending Dunk in a different way when he's kind of wallowing in the loss of Baylor. So the comedy definitely works throughout, and again, it is a tonal balancing act that they have to do, but I think they do a great job with it. The other thing that you brought up, Sean, that I want to talk about is how it's a great wrap up for the Sir Arlen part of this story for Dunk, because obviously there are more stories to come, as you said, and you've alluded to, and we know this because George R. R. Martin, and he's talked about how he wants to write more stories, and so it does a great job of wrapping up that with a very finite in a very finite way, kind of not that maybe he won't return to it again and he might not reference things that Sir Arlen did that we might see in other flashbacks, but even if we don't see that, I think it served its purpose in season 1. And what I love what they had to do is that in that 30, I think the finale is like 33 to 35 minutes. In that short time frame, they really have all of these interactions between Dunk and all these very significant characters, not only for season 1, but who we think probably going forward are going to serve these bigger purposes in his life and in the story of Dunk and Egg. Whether it's, again, the beginning conversation with Lionel, whether it's the conversation he has with Raymond, and now Raymond being with Rowan and what that's going to mean. And you see a lot of the interaction and the facial expressions on Dunk's face being like, man, like, they got my boy, basically, like understanding the situation that he's in. Um, but it's really even the conversation between him and Makar, I think, is one of the best scenes of the entire season, because it's really understanding that Makar recognizes what happened. It's the significance of the loss of his brother, who is eventually going to become king, and even more so, it shows you that change in the tide where Makar is really accepting of Duncan being the knight for Egg. Like he literally kind of puts the offer out there and is like, listen, like I'll give you a place to live, you can make money, you will train you, and then you can in turn train Egg. And so that's like that great aspect of this because the first time we see Makar, he's an asshole. Like he really is a character that you don't really find anything good in, and he's just kind of this guy who's just sitting around and wallowing around, and he's got these shit kids, and he's trying to figure out his way. But now there's a bigger purpose for what his role is going to be in season 2 with the story of Duncan Egg, and then Egg obviously having some of his bigger moments in this finale as well, which we don't talk a lot about Egg necessarily in the series as a whole because he is a younger character and obviously the connection with Dunk is so important in the chemistry, which we have alluded to. But Sean, what did you think about the way that they handled the way that Egg kind of, I don't know if grow up is the right word, but he kind of has a shift in tone in the way that he goes about his business in this finale.
Yeah, I mean, I love the tag on this episode of the reveal that it was Egg's own decision and Makar's left just kind of freaking out. I think that's fantastic. I didn't see that coming. And in general, I think most of the season we're dealing with Dunk and Egg's kind of like what I assume to be their baseline dynamic when Egg's identity is still a mystery. This episode, we don't get too much of the like buddy buddy nature that they had in the first three episodes because we're just sort of settling back into that. It's the promise that come season two, we're sort of back on the road with these boys. And I'm super intrigued to see like how the Targaryen kind of comes out of Egg. I think there's really like a pre-established precedent for the show about Targaryens and the way that they kind of get riled up. So I want to know, there's seeds planted that like maybe Egg will have like a hint of the Targaryen madness in him. But I think generally speaking, like I'm really enjoying the idea of just the nicest, coolest, honorable dude in the world taking this like what could have been another Arion on the road and kind of like showing him how the world really works. I think it's such a great promise and premise. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's so great. I really do have to shout out Dexter and Peter here because I think both of them are great in this role. Um, Peter Claffey, especially, I've been seeing like some behind the scenes videos of him not only talking about the show, but just in general, like doing interviews, and he seems like such a likable dude. So on board with the character, so knowledgeable of the world. He reminds me a lot of how passionate Henry Cavill used to get on certain shows that he was attached to and just like how much you could tell that he was clearly invested and passionate in the world. I'm really, really excited to see this guy grow as an actor. And as far as I know, this is really his like first major role. And obviously with Dexter too, is just, I mean, what is he like 12? They're both great in these roles. And I think that dynamic is crucial and they're nailing it. So that's the most exciting part of a future for this show for me.
Yeah, I think they've already kind of, in a crazy way, established themselves as like actors to keep an eye on even after whatever kind of comes of the series. Because, I mean, Claffey is the, I mean, just in kind of the sense of like sheer size, he would be like again like a dream for the people that like if you don't want to cast like Alan Ritchson in something, it's like Peter Claffey could be that guy now. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So I totally agree. And then Dexter, I mean, forget it. The kid's already great. And I do agree. I've seen tons of the behind the scenes stuff on Twitter all week since the finale and in the last couple of weeks leading up to it. And it's just like they have so much fun together. And they talked a lot about how Peter kind of just immediately jumped into taking Dexter under his wing and hanging out and building Legos and playing video games and becoming really having that real established relationship there. And I do think that's super important. Vinny, for you, we've jumped around a little bit, obviously, but that relationship of Egg and Dunk and what Egg kind of does in the finale too. Did you have any additional comments on kind of how they handle it in the final episode and in the series in general so far?
I don't have any addi nothing new additional comments aside from I mean it's amazing. It's so charming and it's finally a I've said it before. Love Game of Thrones. I love the gray morality that is present within almost every character in the universe of Thrones. But I really appreciate that this story is just a clear-cut underdog story. You know, it you could just root for Duncan Egg, and there's no like they're gonna have their flaws like any good character does, but there's no like questioning, there's no betrayal to the audience, you know. And sometimes that's great. I'm not trying to demonize that. But it's just it's refreshing. But don't have any new additional comments. I do want to piggyback off of what Sean said though about the Targaryen ancestry, how there's some madness in the Targaryens. Are we gonna see that in Dunk? And that's a great question towards the world as a whole, because I think it brings in the philosophy of nature versus nurture. And are the Targaryens really mad inherently? Obviously they have ancestrous blood, they have black magic involved within their bloodline, dragons, all that. So is it an inherent nature thing that they are rageful, deceitful, mad people? Or is it simply because they are all nurtured within spoiled royalty and they never actually truly experience the world and experience perspective? And I think Egg is going to be a good example of that philosophy at play.
Well, they talk a little bit about that in that meeting with Makar too, and how kind of Dunk wants him to experience what it's like how he was as a hedge knight, sleeping under trees and kind of pillaging his own way with him by his side throughout everything. And then Makar kind of says he doesn't want him to live as a peasant, and Dunk kind of giving that comparison of what that is. And Sean, that's I want to return to that scene because again, as somebody who's such a great writer and you focus so much on those kinds of conversations, right? The build up to what forms these relationships and makes the characters make the decisions that they make. What did you think about the way that they handled that first real? I mean, again, it's I guess it's the second conversation that we have and maybe third, I guess, because we have the first interaction, the first meeting with Duncan the Targaryens. Then when he comes in for the trial, the idea of the trial of seven. But this is the first time it's really just the two characters kind of talking to one another. And there's even a bit of respect that Makar kind of has for him, even saying that I love that we get that little tinge of him being like, I'm sure that what Sir Arlen taught you, like, was great, but you still have a lot to learn. And it's like that's probably a gratifying feeling for Dunk, even though he's still really down on himself for the loss of Baylor. So I'm curious your thoughts on the way that they handled that scene and the kind of going off what Vinny said in terms of how Egg's circumstances could reshape him in a different way.
Yeah, I think Makar's character got a huge boost in this episode for me. I think if you're a casual enjoyer of this universe, the amount of Targaryens that you've been subjected to knowing their obscure name and how they're related to each other and who they are and if they're mad or not is a maddening amount of information. So I think going into this show as the first thing that I hadn't read prior, the idea of having to get to know like nine more Targaryens was very daunting to me. And I do think that if there is a critique for the season for me, it's the fact that this is really a 3 hour movie, let's call it. And in that 3 hours, we get introduced to probably somewhere in the 20s of characters. Not all of them are going to get to shine. It's just kind of the way that this thing was going to go, no matter what you do. But I think that they do a really great job of giving you, like, really the essentials for every character. You get something that just cements them in your mind, and then the ones that deserve the importance get it. And I think this was kind of Makar's episode, because to rob a man in this situation of, like, getting to see the situation through him, it would have been kind of robbery for the audience because it made for some great drama. I think his speech about how every time there's a famine, they'll think about, oh, well, if Baylor was here, it wouldn't have been that way, is so great. That reminds me of like early Game of Thrones dialogue. I don't know if it's lifted straight off the page or not, but it's excellent. I think that's such a great scene of dialogue. Maybe my favorite in the season. I also really like this. Just like felt mutual respect between Dunk and Makar. I think that you could really see it and hear it in the lines that this is a character that loves and hates Dunk. He really respects him as a person and I think as a man. I think he knows that if Dunk was a lesser man, that he would have just killed Arion. And he can't like twist it into this vile, like, oh, this motherfucker who killed my son. It's not that. And I think he's smart enough to recognize that and also, emotional enough to not just be like, oh, we're cool. Like it's obviously this horrible situation, but I like that that goes both ways and that Dunk kind of sees him as royalty and as the new like heir to the throne and there's all this respect. And at the same time, he's like, I'm just gonna talk to you man to man. It's great. I think it elevates both characters really, really well. And I think the whole sequence with him is really fantastic.
Did you guys happen to see that the actor who plays Makar, Sam Spruell, came out and said he's not going to be in season two.
Yeah, well, I've gotten a basic understanding of what the next two novellas are. I haven't read them yet, but I kind of know the like gist of just like the premise of each. And it
Hmm.
seems like these are very separate things. So I guess that is kind of like a broader point that we can break into, which is that I think a strength of this season for me is how great some of these side characters are. Like Lionel Baratheon not returning is really a killer because he's great. So like I think that he doesn't really show up for a while. I think we have a couple more seasons to go before he comes back into the fold. Same thing with Robin or the
Raymond,
Ricelings. What did you say?
Raymond Fossaway, is that
Yes,
your
thank
name?
you.
Yes.
Raymond, the broader Targaryen family. I think a lot of them kind of get like sw moved aside as these two go on their adventures. It seems a lot of like, hey, here's the two familiar guys. We're gonna plop them in an unfamiliar situation kind of show. Which is interesting. I don't really know how that's gonna pan out because I think everything kind of worked for this season. And for all I know, the plot of season two might be a lot more tame and, maybe slow. I don't know. It could not be as like on fire as this intro was, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But do you guys think that the show can sort of be carried on the Dunk and Egg dynamic alone, or is it gonna hurt you as well that we're missing a lot of these side characters?
Vinny, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I don't see a problem with it personally. I have no idea what the other two novellas are about, so who knows what's gonna happen there. I literally am going in completely blind. But the thing I like about this form of storytelling is that it feels truly world building esque, right? It's not trying to be a story that's feeding into fan service, like, oh, you remember that one character you really liked? No, it's a journey. It's an adventure with these characters like every fantasy, and they're gonna meet people along the way. And that is the philosophy of the Hedge Knight. And it's what you see commonly in fantasy adventure stories. And I like that. I like that. I like that it's gonna when these characters that we do like Lionel, Raymond, etc., when they do return, it's gonna be far down the line because that's the way adventures work, and that's the way the world works. And I think it's just going to give us more world building. They talked about Dorne. Uh, Dunk was like, or not Dunk, Egg was saying how Dorne has amazing puppet shows. I've always wanted to go. That would be so awesome to see Dunk and Egg in like the Mediterranean desert-esque area of Dorne. Like that would be so cool. And that's what I really like about it. It reminds me of those early Thrones seasons where before, every character had fast travel, it took long times for people to come together, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I agree with what Vinny just said, but I mean, again, I'm not gonna skirt around the inevitable. Like, there's a lot of characters that I do love that I'm gonna miss out on not seeing in a season two. I think that, again, like you said, Sean, like Makar kind of raised up the ranks for me after this, and I was like, I would love to see more interactions between those characters. But Sam Spruill already said he's hoping to be back for season three. So again, I haven't read the novellas either, and I don't think Vinny has. So we don't know kind of where that story is gonna unfold, but. The one good thing about it is that, like Vinny said, it opens the door to create more loving characters, more characters that we can kind of we can relate to, more characters that we can invest in their stories, and we can hope to see kind of what happens. I mean, again, we talked about this last week, but like Baylor had within a very short time is one of my favorite Thrones characters, and he doesn't get a lot of time within the show. So the fact that Ira Parker feels confident in the way that he wants to build it, and we talked a little bit at the tail end of the episode last week about how he has this very large plan for how he wants to kind of go about these stories. And again, it's going to be interesting because he is so connected in the writing with George that it's going to be curious to see, like, I don't know, maybe George decides to go, well, why don't we do a season four first and we'll write it for TV and then I'll come out and make the novella as we're doing the show. and then it kind of becomes a simultaneous release. I think that could be an interesting way about how they go about it, because I do think that the show, I mean, I don't know if you guys had seen, but I think by the finale they were getting like 24 million viewers for the finale, which is like an insane number. Like HBO shows haven't gotten those numbers in quite a long time. I don't think since maybe Succession, and I think it actually probably was maybe more than Succession. And I think the fervor for this show has just grown and grown and grown over the weeks. And I do think the other thing is that like Thrones became a show that was very rewatchable for a lot of people until we got to the final season and everyone's like, all right, I'm bailing the fuck out. I'm not going to do this again. This first season, you could rewatch it all the time because it's so bite-sized, it's so bingeable, it's so great. So I mean, I think that there, I don't think there should be reason to worry because this has been such a success, and I think it's been a bigger success than even they anticipated. But I do think that there's obviously going to be, um, for some maybe casual fans, it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that with all these new characters. But again, the heart of the show, like you talked about, Sean, is the relationship between Dunk and Egg.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just want more. I want more of this show. I think that's really the biggest praise that I could give season one is that like I said, if it was its own thing, I'd be raving about it for years to come. And luckily I don't think I'm going to have to because we're gonna get more relatively soon in terms of the modern TV landscape. I love these characters. I think they're perfectly cast. I think that everything is green for this show right now. I think that the actors are in a great spot. I really trust Ira Parker as a showrunner. Um, I think that HBO knows that this is going to be a big hit, and it already kind of is. I think audiences are surprisingly, almost miraculously back on board with Game of Thrones, um, which is a second chance that I don't think they're willing to squander. Um, since Game of Thrones and since the flub of 2018 season 8 Game of Thrones, I think they've recognized that like, oh shit, like this is kind of our series that we're just gonna like churn out forever. I think that this is kind of HBO's Star Wars. Like they're not gonna let this die. It's gonna keep going. George R. R. Martin's gonna be w well gone, and they're still gonna be turning out like original content. And I think that that's kind of the last thing that I want to touch on, which is that I still adhere to the theory that I think George R. R. Martin also knows that this is his chance to kind of right the wrong of what happened with Thrones. Um, I think that he's a guy who's been in trouble with his legacy for the better part of a decade. I think that's slowed his writing dramatically. And hopefully this gives him the boost to be like, okay, like I have a second go here. I have way more hope of seeing more Dunk and Egg than ever seeing A Song of Ice and Fire wrap up at this point, which part of me thinks that's kind of tragic. The other part of me thinks that if he manages to do that and the adaptation is done in the way that it's done for this first novel, this could surpass Thrones. It totally could. And I never thought I'd be able to think that because like Vinny, I think the first like four, maybe even six seasons of Thrones is the best TV ever made. So, you know, if we're talking on like that level, that's very exciting prospect for the future of this show.
Vinny, do you have a follow-up to that?
Not really, but I agree. I agree. That's my follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too. I think that the legacy of George R. R. Martin is going to be very unique to follow in his remaining years. He's up there in age, obviously, and it's no secret about the way that his material has been handled over the years and how it's kind of now defined him in a different way. And it's not only that, but it's the whole legacy of what Game of Thrones means. And I think but right before we started recording this is a much larger conversation that I don't want to get into in this podcast, but maybe down the road we can. But it seems like now Paramount is going to be getting Warner Brothers instead of Netflix, which is going to be very interesting because Paramount has their own streaming service and HBO is its own thing that's owned by Warner Brothers. And how is that all going to kind of happen? And who knows if George wants to work with the people at Paramount? Like who knows how that goes? And obviously HBO owns the rights, and we'll see how that kind of goes. But with House of the Dragon in particular, like I don't think House of the Dragon season one was unbelievable, but I thought that it had a lot of promise. And season two was when a lot of the reported issues kind of came to a head with George R. R. Martin and the showrunner. and then season two was a big issue. Now, coming off of the end of this, we're gonna get a season three of House of the Dragon, one that has taken them time, and they took their time on to try to right the wrongs of what a lot of the fan reaction and fan backlash was to season two. So, like Sean did say, we are going to get another show that we all really love. We might get two seasons of Night of the Seven Kingdoms or Nine Kingdoms, however you want to categorize it now going forward. We might get two more seasons of that before we get another season of Pluribus. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because of the way that, again, modern landscape of television, like Sean said. But having said that, what do you guys think about where Thrones is right now, now coming off of this, and we have House of the Dragon's third season coming out, which is going to be its penultimate season because it's only going to get four seasons. That was confirmed by HBO's head of programming. Where do you guys think they go with that? Obviously, different stories, different timelines, but do you think they're going to be able to build off of the success of the show going into that season, or do you think that it's not going to translate the same way? People are just going to be like, no, we just want more of Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
I think that this is sort of the big question, right? And my mind, again, tends to go to Star Wars, where I think that they know this is a money machine and they're going to just print shows. I think that when House of the Dragon wraps up, I would imagine Duncan Egg will still be going and we'll get something else to fill House of the Dragon's shoes. I'm sure there's already projects in development, yada yada yada, movies, shows, animated show, whatever it may be. I'm sure they're churning out more stuff. I think the reason that I have such high hopes for Night of the Seven Kingdoms is because this is the last real work that Martin has done. It comes from the original author, the architect of this world, right? So Martin's writing and his philosophy and his work with themes and character are the reason that people love this world. That's not an argument. It's just the way that it is. He's an incredible writer. He writes characters and character arcs that make you really just fall in love with people and how either gray they are or how much you can just root for a good old dude. Like in this situation, it doesn't really matter. He's just an amazing character writer. And I think that the end of Game of Thrones and season two of House of the Dragon kind of became about, oh, people really like this world because it has cool dragons and big battles and people hitting each other with maces. And I think that when Martin does go and we run out of his material, there's a chance that, probably a high chance that at least one of the new projects will just be that. We'll be like, we're gonna do Aegon's conquest, and even though we don't know anything about the characters, it's gonna be the biggest dragon you've ever seen, and it's gonna blow up all the places you know. So it's like, okay, it'll be cool. I'll probably go, nice, this rocks. But at the same time, like the heart of the show is with what I'm talking about. So it concerns me, and at the same time, it gives me a lot of optimism that Dunkin' Egg can really go the distance here. I hope that it does because I think a lot of my A Song of Ice and Fire eggs are in the dunk basket. You know.
Sean. Vinny, did you have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to piggyback off of that point of how House of the Dragon, we really saw that because back when Game of Thrones was the most popular show on TV, and it was such a pop cultural phenomenon where, everyone, there was memes, there was this whole culture that was cultivated around, oh, are you Team John? Are you Team Danny? Or who do you think should be on the throne? This, that, right? And then House of the Dragon really tried to, within their marketing, push that of like, exactly what Sean said. Like, oh, you guys really like the action, so here's five bajillion dragons on the screen that takes up half the budget. And oh, but there's a dragon, right? So, and then all these gaps within Fire and Blood that was never explained are being filled in with really uninteresting plot points or just character assassinations. And and just as a whole, right? And and then again, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but again, they try to play into this pop culture phenomenon with the marketing of like, oh, are you team green? Are you team black? Right? This and that. But that's not what makes it good. What makes it good is that it is an amazing political thriller. That this world is really a political thriller at the end of the day. Like the dragons are a piece on the chessboard, right? And that's what makes those early seasons of Thrones good. And I really, really hope they don't lose it, because I know I apologize if I'm just repeating what Sean said, but I do agree with you, and I'm very passionate about that because that's what makes it good, and we're losing it because yes, it's a fantastical world. Yes, the world is cool, but there's so many other good things to appreciate about what makes these stories good.
You make me think a lot about Lord of the Rings right now because I see these stories as kind of parallels. They're two of my favorite stories, period. I think the Lord of the Rings trilogies are the best movies ever made. I'm in love with every aspect of them. And again, I think that was a similar situation where I love a lot of stuff about Lord of the Rings that the average person does, but some of my favorite stuff in there are just these tiny little moments that are about something completely outside of like the fantasy genre. Just this idea of like that the smallest person can change the world in a huge way. There's all of these great scenes where they're talking about like, the meaning of life and just these themes that like really, really stuck with me as a kid and still impact me today. And Thrones has kind of been my like adult version of that. It has a lot of like incredible scale. There's so much like cool shit and lore and world building. I like still fall asleep to Westeros and Middle Earth lore videos that I throw on YouTube. So like I understand the appeal of those things, but I haven't seen fantasy that I've loved in some kind of other form that's not visual, like a book or whatever it may be that's been adapted past the author's intent that has captured what the author did. Rings of Power is dog shit for that reason, because they don't get it. Like they don't know what about Lord of the Rings clicked for everybody. Like it wasn't the epic battles, which are peak, don't get me wrong, but that's not the point. And it's a very similar thing with Thrones. And I worry that without Martin, despite everyone's qualms with him about, not being able to just finish it and avoid this problem, I just hope that the executives know that that's the core of these stories. And that's why I think I love Ira Parker, is because I think he does get that. I think he legitimately understands that. And I think Peter Claffey understands that. And I'm sure Dexter is going to as time goes on. So it's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the one thing I don't want to go too much on a tangent off what you said, Sean, but I think that the big thing with like Rings of Power is that that is a conglomerate just swallowing up an IP and being like, this is what we're going to give you. And not
Yeah.
to say that obviously Warner Brothers isn't a giant organization that has obviously been in control of these rights, but they've really worked hand in hand with George for a lot of this process since Game of Thrones kind of came on screen. And so I'm going to be very interested to see kind of what happens if and when Paramount kind of takes over what the Game of Thrones universe is. And you brought up a couple things before, so I think that maybe when we get back in the studio, it'd be fun to do a quick, like, I don't know, 20-minute discussion about all of the future of what this world is going to be. But a lot of the things, Casey Bloys, again, the head of programming at HBO, he said the things they're working on right now. Um, the animated Sea Snake project that is with Gendy Tartakovsky. That looks like that might be the next thing that's going to be coming.
Yeah.
Aegon's Conquest, which you brought up already, Sean, is going to be written by Mattson Tomlin, who wrote the Batman, and he's writing the Batman Part Two. I'm sorry. He also developed Terminator Zero, which was on Netflix. He did the Sea Beast, which is an animated kind of in the similar world on Netflix, and he's doing the screenplay for Berserker, which is a comic that Keanu Reeves had written, as well as the Jon Snow and Arya Stark sequel that they're now starting to talk about more. That's also in development. So those are the three big ones that they've talked about. Obviously, one kind of based directly off of the finale of, or the conclusion of Game of Thrones proper, and then an animated project and Aegon's Conquest. So curious to see where they go with that. We'll see what happens. That we'll save that for a different conversation. But I feel like at this point we've been talking for a while. Do we want to get into scores for
Yeah,
season
sure.
one? All right. Sean, would you like to start?
Oh, geez. Okay.
You want me to start? I'll start.
I could go. I'm really torn between two numbers because the Thrones head in me is like, dude, obviously. But then my critical self is like, you don't give that number out, dude. You don't give that number out. There is a single season one in television history that I think is a 10, and it's True Detective season one. Um, I I think I gave Pluribus a 9.
Yes,
And
you did.
I have to admit that I like this show more than Pluribus. We are in February. We've topped my entire TV roster of last year, which is so great. I think that this is like a small thing. So for some reason, it feels strange to me to be like, oh, dude, banger, because it's 3 hours. It's this little tiny thing that you hid. But then again, like if this was a mini series, I really think like I'm never gonna stop talking about it. I think it's like a really, really strong first season. And then when I was thinking like, okay, like what are my flaws with it? I come up pretty short. So like I'm gonna give the hesitant 10 here.
Okay.
I don't think there's really much wrong with this. It's done a lot for me as a fan of this world and Westeros, and I just think it's a really, really promising start. I almost think it could be retroactively shifted to a 9. Like if this is like the only banger and then it goes straight off the rails, I might be like, all right. But like for now, and because of like how passionate I am and how positive I feel about the future of the Thrones world because of it, I'm gonna stick with the 10, dude. It's a must
Okay.
watch.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Vinny, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm gonna give Night of the Seven Kingdoms season one a 9.5. Because again, I enjoyed it a lot stronger than a lot of the shows I saw last year, which I gave a 9. Similar to what Sean said. I don't think it's quite there at a 10, just because there's still so much that I think they cut corners a lot of the time because of runtime, but I also like how bite-sized these episodes are because of how well paced they are. They're really being constricted into, what's the word? No filler, at all. It's all go, 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 which I like. But I do think they cut corners at some moments. I think I wish we had like one, two more interactions with some of the knights and thus versa. And whatnot. Anywho, 9.5. And the last thing I'll say, which I know this will be talked about in our larger discussion about the future of the Song of Ice and Fire adaptations. But I really hate the idea of a John and Arya sequel show.
I'm so glad you said something about it because Darian,
Yeah.
you were like, let's move off of it, but I am so opposed to that idea. I hate
Oh,
that idea.
me too. Hey, and we'll talk more about it in our larger discussion. Subscribe and
Yes,
Yeah.
follow for
subscribe and
that.
follow so you can see that conversation when it happens. That's why I
Yeah.
did it as a transition, Sean.
Sorry.
But no, it's fine. But I'm glad you brought it up, Vinny, because I agree, and I think a lot of people do as well. So I'm in an interesting spot too. I think we're all kind of in the same boat with this. It's funny, we're just gonna kind of descend in a way because I'm gonna give it a 9. I'm gonna give it a very strong 9. Um, the reason and again, Vinny gave the opportunity to give the point fives, which I know Sean also doesn't like. But the reason, so for me, looking back at the last 4 weeks of the show, I think it's almost perfect. I think that the last four episodes are really, really, really great. I do think that those first couple of episodes just took a little bit to get me fully invested in the story. And I think that I feel similarly to what Sean said. I don't there's not many season ones. I mean, True Detective, I completely echo your sentiment. And there might be another one if I really thought about it, but there's not many season ones that I would give kind of a 9.5 or a 10 to because there's so much that comes with the after of what's going to happen with the continuation of the characters. And I think there's always room to grow from where you're starting with those characters. So Though, I mean, we're going to miss out on some of my favorites in this season, like Lionel and Baylor and Raymond in a season two, potentially. I'm going to give it a very strong 9, and I agree with what both of the guys said. This is definitely a must watch. The fact that this came out in January, I believe is when it started, is so great for the year in TV. You just kind of hope now that the momentum kind of keeps going, because I felt similarly to when Severance came out last year in January, and I was like, man, this is going to be hard to top. And so it's going to be, I'm very curious to see if any shows this year will be able to top this, whether it's on HBO or another network in general. But hopefully you guys have been following us along week to week, covering Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Sorry this took a little bit longer to get out for you guys, but happy we hopped on Zoom to have this discussion with all of you guys. Really looking forward to talking about more in the future of Game of Thrones, more in the future of George R.R. Martin's world that he's developed and working with these creators and different kind of projects and things like that. As Vinny already said, subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like if you guys can. Follow us on social media. All that stuff will be below me in the video. It's also in our YouTube description. You can follow us. We got a lot of upcoming stuff. February was kind of a slower month, except for Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but starting in March, a lot of movies upcoming. Going to be covering film festivals all across the country, basically, and a very exciting kind of jumping right into the end of the first quarter of the year with a lot of projects. So thank you guys for tuning in and watching. Just signing off. I've been Darian Scalamoni.
I've
I've
been
been
video
Sean
back.
Villas.
Oop.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
Go ahead, Sean.
I've been Sean Villa.
And I've been video, man.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
This is the culture.